My name is Bruno Bianchi-Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es, and this is the Spanish Digital Nomad Visa webinar. Today is Wednesday, the 2nd of July, 2025. You can ask questions in the chat box in the bottom right corner of your screen. Make sure to add a question mark at the end of your questions. And then after I finish with the presentation, I'll go through the questions, and hopefully I can answer them or at least point you in the right direction. A little bit about Spainguru. First of all, our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. You can see some nice reviews online out there. You can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. We have a weekly newsletter that I send every single Monday featuring the top discussions in Spainguru's social media, YouTube channel with almost 1,000 videos, if not more, and the blog posts, more than 1,700 blog posts, and of course, a huge Spainguru community with more than 150,000 members, total aggregated memberships. And the most interesting group, Spanish Digital Nomad Visa group, with more than 16,000 members that I highly recommend you joining today. Here's the group. It's basically facebook.com/groups/Spanish Digital Nomad Visa. There's the QR code. If you haven't joined yet, please make sure to join today. It's absolutely free, and you will be in touch with other Spainguru community members who will be asking questions, receiving answers, and also having first-hand experiences. Now, if you need professional advice, the most important advice probably is immigration and tax advice. You can find vetted partners on Spainguru.es. I have been working with them for several years, so they stood the test of time. And also you can find financial planning and other auxiliary services. For example, visa-compliant health insurance, medical certificates, sworn translations, postal services in the US and the UK, and other services, more than 100 services with discounts, referral codes, etc., bank accounts, money transfer services, property rentals, mortgages, and so much more. So I highly recommend you going on Spainguru.es and spend a few minutes at the very least checking it out, because I'm sure you're going to find something useful there. Remember that this webinar is not legal advice. Please consult with an immigration expert and not an immigration lawyer. So it's important that you understand that. Hopefully this will give you an overview on the key changes of this Spanish Digital Nomad Visa in 2025, step-by-step requirements and how to meet them, okay, to be eligible for this visa and to hopefully get approved, which documents, we're going to go through which documents you need and how to prepare for them, what taxes and social security contributions would apply once you move to Spain, how the renewal process works, okay, and also some news about it, and how to avoid common mistakes and delays. So I have structured this webinar into 7 different areas, okay, introduction and objectives, some terminology also, so we all understand the different terms that we use for this visa, the update in 2025, and then we're going to go through the formalities, requirements, application checklist, taxes and social security, visa renewal, and a few more bonus stuffs. Let's start with the terminology. First of all, UGE, Unidad de Grandes Empresas, is the government unit that processes the digital nomad visa applications, okay? What is an apostille? It's an international certification. The Hague Convention, The Hague is a city in Netherlands. There's a convention from that city that puts together many countries in which they decided that this certificate, this apostille, will make official documents from each of those countries valid in front of other countries from the same convention. What is a sworn translator? It is an officially certified translator by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So all documents, official documents that are not in Spanish, should be sworn translated. Not all of them need to be sworn translated. Some of them just translated by Google, using Google or ChatGPT, but many official documents, okay, need to be sworn translated by a specific sworn translator. You can find them on Spainguru.es. Then the A1 certificate or certificate of coverage, okay, it's called A1 in the UK, but now you can use also American certificate of coverage, for example, is to avoid enrolling in the Spanish social security system because you're already paying into the social security of your origin country. Autónomo, okay, autónomo is the legal and fiscal status of a self-employed individual in Spain, a contractor, a freelancer, okay, pays taxes via the figure or the type of called autónomo, okay. Certificate of coverage, we mentioned it, okay, is the, let's say, also the A1 or COC, okay, which is that proves that you are covered by your home social security system. The empadronamiento is the municipal registration, proving, okay, it's a proof of address. So once you move to Spain and you rent a property, for example, you go to the city hall and you get a certificate saying that you are living into that certain address, and you will need that proof of address in 90% of cases in police stations in order to get your residency card. That is the plastic card called TIE, where your face appears and explains your immigration status in Spain, okay? And I just explained what the TIE card is. Now let's go directly into the 2025 update, okay? Because this visa has started in 2023, so it is a very new visa, has gone through many different, let's say, evolution, okay? A lot of evolution, okay? And things are changing constantly, right? So first of all, and this is super fresh news, W-2 employees, so not contractors, no freelancers, but employees working for a company in the United States are now digital nomad visa eligible, okay? It used to happen that the certificate of coverage from the USA wasn't accepted by Spanish authorities, but now there are more and more cases where this is happening, okay? So if you're a W-2 employee in the USA and you can access this certificate, you have potential for eligibility for the digital nomad visa. It used to be that W-2 employees were recommended to change their status to 1099, to contractor status, because their certificate of coverage from the US wasn't going to be accepted by Spanish authorities. So as we said, who qualifies for the certificate of coverage? W-2 employees of US companies working remotely from Spain, up to 5 years, no more than 5 years. And they must apply via their employer with the US company details, proof of remote arrangements, okay, proving that they're working remotely as well. So the COC will help avoid Spanish Social Security contributions. Who may not qualify, and this is also an important thing to note, self-employed or S-Corp owners often don't meet the SSA's US-based business criteria, and owning more than 25% of a company can trigger legal and tax issues in Spain because the way that the different laws and tax regulations are written. So it's important to go always with a professional, with an immigration lawyer experienced in this specific visa, okay, the digital nomad visa, because not everyone is experienced in this visa, okay? So it's important to go with one that knows exactly what is going on and following up with the recent changes as well. This is if you happen to be a W-2 employee in the States. This is a step-by-step guide on how to obtain your certificate of coverage. When you get the recording of this video, if you're interested, you can go back and watch it again. Now, more changes to this visa in 2025. What's different now? So more documents now require apostilles, especially company certificates. There are stricter checks for business owners to prove real company activity, okay? So the Spanish authorities want to see that those companies are real, that they're operating correctly, they're not zombie companies, okay, that were just created for the purpose of obtaining a visa, okay, or an off-the-shelf company. So be careful with that. Professional experience must be backed by official evidence. Okay, this is also important, proving that instead of having, for example, a university diploma, if you're going to apply instead with professional experience, you need to be able to back that up with official documentation. More changes. What is different now? And this is something that was commented very much at the beginning of the visa. The 24% tax rate, or Beckham law. This is a special tax regime, okay, where you pay a 24% tax rate on the income generated from Spain, okay? Always, and it was always like this, 99% of cases, it's applicable only to employees or W-2, okay, who moved to Spain working for a non-Spanish company, so a company from abroad. So only employees, in practical terms, will be eligible for the Beckham law special tax regime with a 24% tax rate. Okay. Otherwise, don't count on it very often. You will have to be paying ordinary income progressive tax rates that range 19% to 47%, depending on your level of income. Now, UGE, okay, the Unidad de Grandes Empresas, decisions can be inconsistent, okay, at the very least. So you have to be very prepared to adapt. And I've seen cases in the groups, okay, where people applied with certain documentation, they were denied, and then they changed a few things. Okay, and they applied again, and they got their approval, or even they just reapplied without changing anything, just submitted everything again, and then they were granted the visa. Okay, so of course those are extreme cases, but it did happen. Those decisions can be quite inconsistent, so you have to be also careful with that and have the right expectations. Renewals are now treated nearly the same as new applications. Something to have in mind, because a lot of people get their visas, and now that the new, they're starting with the first, let's say, renewals for several people, and they think that it's going to be very easy, very straightforward, but actually it's almost as having new applications, and you need to prepare accordingly with the right time in advance. Let's talk about apostilles and legalization. What's required now? Before, only a few documents needed apostille, but now it's different. And as we said, there's more scrutiny about the companies. Company registration certificates must be apostilled. Tax or social security reports used as proof require apostille as well. Marriage, birth certificates or civil partnership certificates, if applicable, of course, if you're applying as a non-married couple, will need apostilles, okay? this was always the case. Documents from outside of Spain must be legalized or apostilled under the Hague Convention. Again, what we said, if your country is part of the Hague Convention and you need to submit official documentation, it needs to be apostilled, and if it's not in Spanish, it needs to be sworn translated, as I said, by a sworn translator, an official translator appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The good news is that you can do all that online, the sworn translation, okay, and receive the documents scanned, and that will be enough to submit, okay? Now, translation, as we said, needs to be official, and of course, you have to be careful because it takes time to gather the documentation and the processing times, not only to get the original documentation, but also to obtain the apostilles and also the sworn translation, although that doesn't take too long, okay? Takes time. So if you're planning to come to Spain to apply with the digital nomad visa and you haven't done your homework with enough time, be careful, okay? Because you may lose a big opportunity. You need to gather all the documentation, allow enough time, calculate the different time frames for the different documentations that you need to gather. And once you have everything, you fly to Spain and you apply for the digital nomad visa the day after. Let's continue to talk about the extra scrutiny, okay? And now focusing on business owners. There's more questions and more requirements of documentations. The authority now requires proof that your company is active and legitimate. As we mentioned before, off-the-shelf or inactive companies are likely to be rejected. And in order to prove the activity of the companies, they will ask you for company tax returns, invoices and contracts, proof of business expense or investment, evidence of clients and service delivered, okay? And something important, because a lot of people apply with companies with their same name and surname, okay? If your company has your name or is family-owned, scrutiny increases as well, okay? So more control from the Spanish authorities in 2025. Now, you can apply for this visa in two ways. Either you prove work experience or you have a university diploma related to the activity that you're applying with, okay? Now, if you prove work experience, to qualify without a degree, you must show at least 3 years of relevant professional experience, okay? So what is expected by the authorities? A detailed letter from former employers or clients, and you must outline the role, responsibilities, and dates. Everything must match, okay? The type of role, the type of activity that you were doing must match. So there are no, let's say, inconsistencies in the filing that you are submitting. Official proof is now required. For example, Social Security records, okay, HMRC, SSA 750 for the US, tax documents, 1099s, P16 in the UK, self-employment pages, invoices and bank statements tied to your freelance work, okay? So all the supporting documents must match your CV and current job role, because one of the things that you need to prepare also is a curriculum vitae or resume, okay? And that resume must match what you also submit to prove your work experience, okay? So the more formal and verifiable your experience, the better, okay? The stronger the case. We're coming back to tax, and we said that at the beginning of this visa, we have heard so much publicity that you will going to pay less taxes, okay? In Spain, a 24% tax rate by being eligible for the Beckham law tax regime. As we said, 99% of cases, only employees are eligible and not business owners or freelancers, okay? Something important, tax experts will tell you that it is not really worthy to go for the Beckham law if you don't make at least 60,000 euros annually, okay? At least, okay? Because there are more, let's say, administrative burden, you don't have access to certain allowances and deductions, okay? So if you are making less than 60K, definitely it is better to pay taxes as normally as anyone else in Spain and not going with this special tax regime, okay? And also for the eligibility for the special tax regime, people working for a company, they don't own, okay? It is not, you wouldn't be eligible for this regime if you own the company, okay? Now, if you're not eligible for the special tax regime, consider that you will pay standard progressive income tax rates, okay? If you're self-employed, you will also have to pay social security contributions directly to Spain, okay? So your taxes and social security contributions, that will grant you access to public healthcare system, pension, and unemployment, etc., okay? So remember that at the beginning, a lot of people thought that they were going to pay 15% tax. This is something that companies pay 15% in Spain, okay? They start paying this initial tax rate, or that 24% flat rate from Beckham law were quite misleading, okay, this headline. So make sure to always consult with with a professional tax advisor, okay, that you can find on Spainguru.es, okay? This is important. Now, for example, if you go to Spainguru here, you see consultations here. Here in consultations, you have immigration experts and tax experts. You go to tax experts, and here you can contact all the tax experts, and you have also tax software as well for your filings in Spain and also in the US, if you happen to also have the US passport. Now, we said that the UGE decisions were quite inconsistent at the very least and unpredictable, okay? So this unit, this government unit that handles the visa applications, okay, can vary in interpretations and requirements depending on who is reviewing your file, okay? So, you know, don't be so surprised if you face a rejection, okay? Even if you have submitted, you know, a very good file, okay, and you made a very strong case. Many people talk about the possibility of appealing. So most lawyers, if not all of them, they will recommend you not appealing because it takes a long time and it's not recommended. The best is just to reapply. And in order to reapply, make sure that you have applied very quickly, so you don't burn. Let's say you have 90 days to enter the Schengen zone and to stay in Spain, and that's the period in which you can apply for the digital nomad visa. So when you enter Spain, apply immediately so you get your answer as quickly as possible, usually 20 working days. And if you got denied, you can reapply again, and you still, let's say, during your validity period, your Schengen period. Okay, so that's important. Now, be careful because also seasonality exists for the digital nomad visa applications. Decisions around holidays may be stricter or rushed, okay, because people want to go on holidays, or maybe people already went on holidays and there are less employees reviewing the cases. Now, let's go with requirements. Those were the news, the updates for 2025. Okay, so you stay updated with what's going on. Now, let's talk about, let's say, more about the formalities. Let's talk about the core eligibility criteria for the DNV. In order to qualify for this visa, you must at least make 2,763 euros per month. Okay, this is before tax and expenses. This is gross value. Okay, and this is because the SMA, or minimum wage in Spain, is 1,184 euros in 2024. You multiply, you have to have 200% of the minimum wage in 14 pays in 1 year. Okay, this is the calculation. I will show you in the next slide. Okay, you must work remotely for a non-Spanish company and or clients. Okay, and maximum 20% of your income may come from Spanish companies. You have to have either a university degree, or you have to prove at least 3 years of relevant professional experience, as we mentioned. You need to provide a clean criminal record for the past 5 years and prove your employer or clients have existed for at least 1 year. Okay, you need to also confirm that your work is performed remotely using digital tools. So not all professions, let's say, or type of work are eligible for the digital nomad visa. Talking about the minimum earnings threshold, as we said, one applicant is 2,763 euros. Okay, and this is 200% of 16,576, which is 1,184 euros times 2 times 14 pays, because you get 1 pay per month plus 1 extraordinary pay in the summer and 1 extraordinary pay in Christmas, therefore 14 pays. Okay, so the yearly income for one applicant is a little over 33,000, and then for dependents, okay, it will be 75% of the minimum wage. Therefore, for let's say for the first dependent and for the third dependent is 25%, and on and onwards is only 25%. So there you have the calculations on the minimum earnings threshold for up to a family of 4, so you can do your calculations. Okay. Remember, as we said, amounts are gross before tax and expenses. If you're self-employed, the income must be shown before deducting costs. Okay, so in a way, gross as well. Savings may help support your case, but cannot replace consistent income. Something that I asked Sofia Mejail from CABR relocation agents. She's an experienced immigration lawyer, and she said that, you know, the savings could not be more than 10%, let's say, of the total amount that you're proving your finance for financial proof. Okay, there's nowhere where it's written. Okay, but it's something that more or less you know, as a rule of thumb, you must have in mind. Now, income must be documented through contracts, pay slips, invoices, bank statements, and as we said, maximum 20% may come from Spain. Okay, of course, you don't have to have any income from Spain. It's not a must. You can have up to 20%, but 100% of your income could come from outside of Spain. Now, let's go through the application checklist and what you need to submit. Okay, you need a signed letter from your employer or main client where you confirm your role, income, and permission to work remotely from Spain. Then a contract, ideally without a fixed end date. Okay, so once you get granted your visa, you get it for the maximum. If you apply for a consulate, from a consulate, it will be 1 year. If you apply from Spain, it will be 3 years. An advantage from of doing it from Spain. Okay, last 3 months of personal bank statements showing income, last 3 months of payslips or invoices, company certificate with apostille. Okay, now with apostille, proving that your employer or client has existed for at least 1 year. Proof of qualifications in the case of having a university degree, or 3+ years of relevant experience, criminal background check and signed declaration, private health insurance in some cases. So if you're moving as an employee and you're submitting a certificate of coverage from Social Security from another country, you will have to get a private health insurance in order to apply for the digital nomad visa. Otherwise, if you plan to turn into an autónomo, okay, in Spain, you will pay Social Security in Spain directly, and that will grant you health insurance, public healthcare system in Spain. Therefore, you don't need to hire a private health insurance. Okay, passport application form, payment receipt of the fees, photo, and each document must be sworn translated or translated and apostille or legalized if required. Okay, so not all the documents, not everything needs to be sworn translated, but certain documents need to be. So therefore, always check the official requirements and experienced lawyers who will tell you exactly what, because there's some money to be saved in sworn translations, that people sometimes opt to sworn translate documents that maybe didn't need to be sworn translated. For example, the resume doesn't need to be sworn translated, just to give you an example. Now, applying as an employee, W-2 and A1 certificates insights. Okay, if you're employed by a foreign company, remember, your employer must confirm your remote status and your job duties. A W-2 form, W-2 is employee in the States, okay, but it can be an employee from a company in the UK, for example. A W-2 form can support your income, but it's not enough by itself. You may need an A1 certificate to prove you're paying Social Security in your home country, especially important for applicants from countries with bilateral agreements like the US and the UK, okay? Without A1 coverage, Spain may require your employer to register for Spanish Social Security. So they will ask the company, this is the other option, okay? If you can't provide A1 coverage and you're working for a company outside of Spain, that company may go to Spain, okay, and start paying your Social Security in Spain as a company. That is quite expensive, and not many people do it, okay? Therefore, many people opt to turn into a contractor or autónomo, okay, and start invoicing to the company with this new status, all right? And a signed letter confirming no impact on Spain's labor market is also helpful. Okay? Not an official requirement, but helpful to make your case stronger. Let's talk about certificate of coverage, US, Canada, and other countries, okay? We went, I showed you a slide on how to request the certificate of coverage from the US, okay? In Canada, you would request a certificate of coverage from Service Canada. From the EU, EEA, and the UK, use an A1 certificate from your home country's Social Security agency, okay? And some key points. The certificate must cover the full duration of your initial visa, okay? And if it expires, you may have to register as self-employed in Spain. So the initial certificate of coverage, for example, that you can supply will have an expiration date in most cases. In that case, normally you won't be able to renew it, okay? This is the case, at least that I'm reading for UK applicants, employees who maybe have an A1 certificate with a duration of 2 years, and after that, they can't renew it. So if they want to stay in Spain, you need to decide what pathway you're gonna go. There are different pathways, okay, like turning into self-employed instead, or other pathways, okay? And make sure that it is apostille and sworn translated if needed, all right? It's important that you also consider that it takes time to receive those certificates, apostille them and sworn translated, because it can take several weeks. So if you're planning to apply from Spain, make sure to gather that documentation and have enough time, buffer time, in order to arrive to Spain with all the valid documents and be able to apply via the UGE online, but from Spanish soil. Employers paying Social Security in Spain. Is this a viable option? So if you're applying as an employee without an A1 certificate or certificate of coverage, your company may need to register in Spain, okay? So, and they will need to enroll in Spain's special regime for foreign companies. This is in the case in which you cannot provide a certificate of coverage or A1, or you are not willing to become an autónomo in Spain, okay? This is not a common scenario, but it can happen, all right? So your company abroad registers in Spain. This allows them to pay into Spain's Social Security on your behalf, okay? And this is something that it's an option that may be considered, okay, if your company is, let's say, willing to do so, all right? If you plan to go this pathway, you need to talk to your employer early to explore all, the options that you have and your employer has, and avoid delays. Now, if you choose to go self-employed, okay? How and when you register as self-employed in Spain, okay? So imagine that you are not covered by a foreign social security certificate and you choose to become self-employed in Spain or autónomo, okay? What does this mean? This means that you will start paying Spain's social security, okay? And you will have to file regular tax declarations, okay? Quarterly and annually, all right? You will pay quarterly income, okay, on a quarterly basis, all right? And also on an annual basis, all right? And also you will need to declare VAT, or value added tax, which in Spain is the normal rate is 21%. But if you work with companies from outside of Spain, normally you wouldn't charge VAT to those companies. So in general, digital nomads, because of the nature of their activity, don't need to, will not have to pay or gather VAT very much. But still, you need to file whatever you do. And especially if you have income coming from Spain, that income normally will contain VAT, right? Timing matters. Don't register until you've entered Spain and your visa is approved. Okay, it's important that your visa is approved first. If you apply from a consulate and you already come with your visa approved, then you need to register quickly. Okay, in such case, you will have 30 days to complete the process after the arrival. Okay, the regulation says that you need to register as autónomo as soon as possible. They don't tell you a specific time. All right, so it will depend whether you got your visa approved from a consulate and you arrive already with an approved visa, or if you apply from Spain and you're waiting until your visa is granted. Once your visa is granted, register as autónomo as soon as possible. There are some strategies in order to, maybe avoiding being a Spanish tax resident during the second half of the year in which you arrived. Okay, there are some strategies, but you need to talk to a tax advisor in order to decide exactly what to do and how to plan it so you are absolutely legal, okay, with everything that you do, but you don't pay more taxes than necessary. Okay, expenses include monthly social security contributions. You start the first year at around 80-90 euros per year, okay, and they normally go in the second year, they go to 300 euros, but depending on how much income you made on the previous year. Okay, so if you made a lot of income, it can go up to nearly 500 euros per month. Okay, but this is not the usual case for the second year. Okay, and accounting fees. Okay, this is something that is highly recommended. You don't have to do it. But for example, I've been living in Spain for more than 20 years. I used to do my own taxes, but when I became autónomo, it was just too much. Okay, so in my opinion, I highly recommend you going with professionals for that. And if you want, for example, to use, let's say, affordable services for filing taxes as autónomo, you can go here to tax experts on Spainguru, and you can find here Tax Down, for example, and Ren. These are startups, and they work, if you have worked with software to file taxes abroad, this work more or less the same way. They have their teams of gestores or accountants that you can contact via email or via chat, okay, and you will be able to have conversations depending on the plan that you have, of course. But yeah, I personally use TaxDown myself, and I found it very, very easy. It is true that TaxDown is in Spanish, the platform, but the accountants, they all speak English, okay? And in the case of Ren, everything is in English, okay? And the accountants are also in English, okay? So those are some options that I put available to you if you are in this situation, okay? And of course, you can start using the service, and if you, for whatever reason, you want to change, there's nothing tidying you up. You can change whenever you like. Criminal record. What happens if you have a criminal record? Can that affect your application? Yes, actually, background checks are mandatory for part of the process, and you must provide a criminal record certificate from every country you lived in the last and past 5 years. So even minor offenses can trigger delays or rejections. Have to be very, very careful, okay? But the Spanish authorities, UGE, will generally look for serious criminal convictions, okay? If you spend time, conviction time, if there were like blood crimes, etc., normally it is a straight denial. Right? Or if we're talking about fraud, drug-related offenses, or repeated offenses. So if you're in this situation, be careful. Always analyze it with a professional immigration lawyer, with an expert that has experience with this visa, because they will tell you exactly their experience depending on how serious your criminal record is. Okay, and also you will sign a declaration confirming that you don't have any pending criminal charges that don't appear in the certificates that you are submitting. Always, those are official documents, okay? So police checks like FBI background checks, ACRO police records from the UK, they need to be apostilled. In the case of the FBI background check, it needs to be federal apostille, no notarization and state apostille. No, it has to be federal apostille, okay? And of course, those certificates are not in Spanish, so you will need to sworn translate them also. Okay, I have guides on how to obtain the FBA background check on Spainguru.es. Remember that after this presentation, there is a Q&A session. Make sure to ask your questions in the chat box in the bottom right corner of your screen. Make sure also to add a question mark at the end of your question, so it's easy for me to read it. Okay, and if you need to go, and do your stuff earlier, and you think that the information that I'm sharing with you today, which is absolutely free, please leave a review on Trustpilot. You have there on the top, there's a green bar with a red button. If you click it, it will redirect you to Trustpilot, and it only takes 5 seconds to leave a review there if you think, again, that this information is valuable. Now, let's go back to the presentation. Do you need a degree? Okay, so as we said, there are two ways, either a degree, university degree, or showing 3+ years of experience. Okay, so first option, showing a university diploma in a relevant field, okay, related to the job that you are describing, that must be legalized and officially translated. Or the option 2 is at least 3 years of professional experience, must directly be related to the remote work you'll be doing in Spain, and must be supported with documents like employer and client letters that they explicitly said, they mentioned the explicit role and tasks that you were providing, okay, so that everything matches. Okay, there are no, let's say, doubts for the UGE officials that you do something else related but not exactly that. Okay, so the best would be that everything is perfectly aligned, showing social security and tax reports where it shows also the type and role that you were doing. This is also important. Invoices, contracts, proof of service delivered. Okay, so as we said, it must clearly align with your current role and visa application. Okay, how to prove freelance or contract experience. If you're applying as a freelancer or contractor, you need to prove your experience by submitting a detailed CV, okay, aligned with your application. So the concepts must align. There must be a match. Include client letters confirming work history, scope, timelines, and official documents. Okay, they started requiring also more this lately. Social security records from your home country, tax filings, invoices, and proof of payment. Okay, so via bank statements or receipts. Okay, and you have to be extremely organized and methodical. Organize the documents by client or year for clarity, and if necessary, include a document that explains how everything is organized. Consistency is very important. The job that you're doing now must relate directly to the experience that you are showing. Okay, the more formal and verifiable your experience, the stronger your application will be, and the lower the chances of being denied will be. Can you bring your family? Yes. Okay. This is something that for other Spanish visas has changed with the new Reglamento de Extranjería or regulation after May 20th, 2025. Some of these things changed, but the digital nomad visa was not, let's say, impacted by those changes. Okay, you can include your spouse and legally registered or legal registered partner. Okay, so Spain recognizes legal partnerships from other countries, and you can bring children under 18 and also adult children and parents, okay, in specific dependent situations. Okay, so they need to be dependent from you financially, being part of the same family unit, so they can't be married. Okay, and yes, you need to prove that. In order to include a partner or spouse, you must provide marriage certificate or civil partnership certificate, always apostilled and sworn translated if not in Spanish. Proof, and the marriage certificate needs to be updated, so you need to get a new original copy, okay, because they have, unless stated otherwise, a 6-month validity period. Otherwise, you cannot use, if after that period, you cannot use that document to apply for a Spanish visa. All right, so you need to get a new original copy. Proof of shared finances or cohabitation if unmarried and applying as stable partners. Okay, so if you don't have the legal partnership papers for your unmarried couple, it is not the end of the world. You can make a case that you are a stable couple, all right, but you need to prove via documentation, okay, as we said, that you're a cohabitation, you have children together, etc., etc. Okay, your income must increase based on the number of dependents you include. We mentioned in the slide a few slides before, depending on how many dependents you include, it's 200% of the minimum wage, then 75%, and then 25, 25, 25, 25, etc. Again, bringing children and adult dependents and elderly parents, okay? Here's what you need to know. Minor children, you always will need to prove the relationship between your children and you via birth certificate, apostille and sworn translated, new original copy of certificate, and you'll need to prove that the children are financially supported by you or dependent from your income, okay? And this is helpful, it's not a requirement. Showing school enrollment is very helpful, okay? Adult children, so your children that are older than 18 years old, you will prove full economic dependence and that they're living together with you, and In some cases, medical and disability certificates may be needed, okay? These are very specific cases. Now, parents or in-laws allowed only in exceptional situations. Again, you need to prove that they depend financially from you, okay, and they're dependent from you, and you will often be required to provide a notarized declaration, okay? And, of course, you need to prove that you get additional income, okay? Do you need private health insurance? As we said, not everybody needs in order to apply, okay? It's always recommended to have health insurance coverage, okay? Even if you have access to public healthcare system. But as a requirement, do you need private health insurance? So not everyone needs. If you're covered by a valid A1 certificate or a foreign social security, okay, or certificate of coverage, insurance is not required, okay? If you register as self-employed in Spain, you will be automatically covered by the Spanish public healthcare system. Therefore, you don't need to be covered with private health insurance, okay? But if neither of those apply, you will need private health insurance, okay? And there are certain conditions for this health insurance policy to be compliant for a Spanish visa application. Those conditions is, first, has no co-payments or deductibles, offers full coverage in Spain, and that you are covered for the entire duration of your visa, at the very least 1 year. So most of the companies, you will have to pay a full year in advance if you are in this situation. If you need a compliant health insurance company, I highly recommend you working with Carlos Blanco, my recommended exclusive agent from Adeslas, who is also an expert immigration lawyer and who also does procedures of digital nomad visa, together with Sofia, who is an experienced immigration lawyer at CABR. And something very interesting is that he can extend the start date of your policy. In case you want to extend it, you don't want to start it yet, he can extend it a few months more, something that not many health insurance companies give you the option to, so that you start your policy and you don't pay months that you haven't used. Now, let's talk about some essential extras like entry stamps, apostilles, and translations, okay? Passport entry stamp. It is required when you apply from within Spain, okay? You will need to show your passport and they will need to see that you enter Spain and that you are physically in Spain. Even if you apply online anywhere in Spain, you need to be physically in Spain, okay? So you need to prove of legal entry. If you enter Spain via a Schengen country, you know Schengen is a 28 country borderless area, okay? So if you, let's say, drive from France to Spain and you don't get a Spanish stamp, get a declaración de entrada, okay, which is a one-page document issued by the police station near the border or at the airport, okay? That proves that you enter Spain on a certain date, and that will be the proof that you enter Spain on that date, okay? As we said, apostilles, okay? It's very important that you obtain apostille for the relevant documents like criminal records, birth certificates, marriage certificates, company documents now, okay? So it's important. Sworn translations, as we said, not all the documents need to be sworn translated. Many of them can be translated normally without using a sworn translation, but make sure that the ones that are required to be sworn translated are done by an official sworn translator. You can find sworn translator on Spainguru. If you go to services for Spanish visas, sworn translators, you push here, okay, and you will find all these options. I've been working with them for several years, and this company works with any language pair. That means from German or French or Chinese with a sworn translator from Spain, okay? So it is also very, very interesting and it's quite affordable, okay, compared to other companies that I work with. Now, we were talking about CV should match your documented experience and current job, doesn't need to be sworn translated. Application forms must be fully completed and signed. Any errors may cause delays or rejections. So always make sure that you sign correctly all the forms, okay? We mentioned that in most cases, UGE will reject cases in which savings are, have too much part or fraction or represent too much of the total income. Okay, it is not very, very clear, but it is supposed that the digital nomad visa should be based on active income and ongoing earnings. Okay, but there is the possibility if you don't reach the threshold, by a little, you can show substantial savings to make your case stronger, especially if you're applying with multiple dependents. Okay, and or you have a very big variations in your income. If you're working as self-employed, this is very, very common. You don't have a fixed salary. Some months are better than others, and in that case, it is seen more positively that you complement with savings. Okay, what counts as savings? Bank statements with your names, okay, to prove your savings. Fixed terms deposits or investment accounts that are readily available without any penalties. You need to prove that, okay, and proof of consistent ownership and access to all these types of accounts or savings. Okay, when should you register as autonomous? As we said, let's talk about the legal and tax timings. Okay, if you plan to be self-employed in Spain or autonomous, it's important that you don't register before arriving with your approved visa. Okay, so, that is important. Okay, now after you enter Spain, okay, if you apply for a visa in a consulate, okay, and you have a visa and you enter Spain during the visa validity period and you enter Spain, you will have 30 days after entering Spain to apply for your residency card or TIE card. Okay, and supposedly, I would say supposedly because sometimes it takes longer, okay, than 30 days to get your TIE card. Only after that you should register as an autonomo, okay, with the Spanish Social Security, which is the Seguridad Social, so that you start paying your social security contributions, and with the Spanish tax agency, our Agencia Tributaria, to which you will pay your income tax on a quarterly basis and on an annual basis, and also your VAT declarations and other, let's say, tax obligations that you have, like the 720 form for overseas assets declarations and a few other things, okay? Why timing matters? Registering too early may disqualify your visa or affect your tax residency, and registering too late can result in fines or even loss of health coverage. And it's important that you don't have gaps in your health coverage if you want to renew your visa later on or apply for a long-term residence, okay, if you stay in Spain for at least 5 years. Now, applying from Spain, the pros and cons, there are advantages and disadvantages. Most people will recommend you to apply from Spain for several reasons. So you entered Spain as a tourist. Of course, you have prepared your file. You have all your documents. They are all valid. Okay, all apostles, everything. You enter Spain as a tourist and you apply the next day you are here. Okay, hopefully this is the best case scenario. All right. It is faster appointment scheduling than than consulates, which tend to be a bit chaotic. Okay, and they have less appointments. And because you apply online via the UGE portal from within Spain, there are no, let's say, consulate delays. The consulates tend to be more complicated. It is a more streamlined process, even if the UGE can be a bit inconsistent, okay? It is nothing compared to the consulates. The consulates are their own different planets, their own different kingdoms. They have, some of them, they have strict interpretation of the rules. So they're very, very, very inconsistent compared to the UGE, who still is a little bit, okay? There is, of course, greater control over your move, okay, because you can arrive to Spain and you already will get housing. You don't need to have an empadronamiento when you apply, okay, not at that moment, but, you can already get your housing if you're moving with family, schools, etc., okay? And if you plan to bring your family later on, so you apply by yourself and then bring your family, it's an easier family reunification later, okay? You can join, your family members can join later as dependents, okay? And actually, family members have more rights than the main applicant because they can work fully in Spain, not necessary to work remotely or anything. They have a full work permit as dependent of your digital nomad visa in Spain, which is quite good. And also, probably the biggest advantage if you apply from Spain is that if you show an indefinite contract, you will get a residence for 3 years instead of 1 year than if you apply from a consulate. Now, the cons. There is a strict 90-day window, okay? So you must apply within the 90 days of arrival, which are the Schengen rules. Entry proof will be required, as we spoke. Stamp passport by the Spanish authorities. If not, declaración de entrada from the police, nearest police station, within 72 hours of entry of Spain via another Schengen country. The visa will start immediately, okay? Let's say, your 1 year residency will begin on the approval date, not from a chosen start date. This is a little, let's say, disadvantage, okay? Once you get your visa, the date in which your visa was granted, this is when it starts. You cannot choose, to delay the start date like other types of visa applications. For example, the non-lucrative visa, you can ask up to 2 months in advance when you want your visa to start. Then the consulate can give you or not that wish, but it happens. Some risk if denied. No appeal process within Spain. The best that you can do is to reapply if you're still within the 90 days period, or if you need to leave, you have to leave and then potentially reapply from your home country or come back with new documentation, with new valid documentation. Once again, you have days to spend within the Schengen area. I have asked in the Spanish Digital Nomad Visa group from Spainguru, where did you apply from the Digital Nomad Visa? 80% applied from Spain, 20% applied from the consulate. Not too many votes. I did this June 24th. Today is July 2nd, but I took the screenshot maybe 3 days after, so I didn't leave the post very long, but yes, I would say that this is quite representative. This represents quite well the at least what I see in the groups, that most of the people choose to apply from Spain because of all the advantages that it has. Now, the timeline. Step 1, prepare your documents. Step 2, travel to Spain if you choose to apply from Spain. Step 3, you submit the application once in Spain. Step 4, you await their resolution, okay? They have up to 20 business days to give you an answer, all right? And if it's silence, then the visa was granted. And then you will receive the residency, hopefully up to 3 years if you submitted an indefinite contract, okay? Now, let's continue. Working with individuals. What if your clients aren't companies, okay? So not all the digital nomads work for large businesses, and that is perfectly fine. You can apply even if your clients are individuals or sole traders, but the key is to prove the relationship is stable, long-term, and remote, okay? You will need to submit invoices with client names, proof of regular payments, written confirmation from the client about the work you do, and if you have multiple smaller clients, showing consistent income across several months, and avoid contracts that suggest that you're doing work for Spanish-based individuals unless clearly allowed. We talked about the 20% maximum income from Spain, okay? And as we said, once you get your visa, okay, or your residency in Spain, let's say your initial visa, you need to obtain your residency in Spain. And the way to prove your residency is by obtaining a tarjeta de identidad extranjero, or TIE card, that you get at the police station or foreign office, all right? And the appointments to get those TIE cards are very hard to get. What can you do in order to improve your chances, okay? First of all, if you can't get hold of a TIE card immediately within the official 30 days, okay, if your visa was granted before you entered Spain, it doesn't really matter. All the authorities know that this is a common thing to happen, especially, for example, lately in Valencia, there are absolutely no appointments whatsoever. So, people, the weeks pass and still don't or can't go to the police station to put their fingerprints and get their TIE cards. So what you can do, check the appointment sites daily, okay, especially in the early mornings. This is what people suggest. Okay, be flexible with nearby towns within the same province, okay, in order maybe you get an appointment at a police station, in a smaller town outside of the main city, okay? Also, many people choose to use a relocation expert or gestor that can book on your behalf, all right? It doesn't mean that, they take their time to go every single day and try to get appointments for their customers. They do let's say, the hard job, right? And also, people who know, they suggest even doing it in Madrid or Barcelona. Even if you chose, to apply from another city and you plan to live in another city, doing it from Madrid or Barcelona, you travel, you book a hotel, and you apply for your TIE in Madrid and Barcelona, because in effective matters, they won't request an empadronamiento when you apply for your TIE. Okay, so they won't, let's say, care or know that you are not really living in Madrid or Barcelona. Okay, so this is also another option. And in specific urgent cases, if you make the case, you may be able to request a provisional certificate. Okay, so a lot of people start to look for appointments immediately as soon as they get to Spain. Okay, so that's something important. And for doing so, it is important. Another thing that can be helpful is to obtain the digital certificate or clave in order to sign procedures online. So this is also something to have in mind. If you want to read how-to guide about how to get your TIE, there you have a QR code, you have a link, you put Spainguru how-to guide getting your TIE on Google, and it will come up. Now let's talk about taxes and social security. Okay, what you will pay as a social security, year 1 versus year 2. Okay, normally the first year you will pay between 80 euros to 100 euros. Okay, in the year 2 it will increase. Normally the typical range will be between 230 to 300 euros, depending on the first year income that you had. Okay, but if you had a lot of income, maybe that social security contribution even increases. Okay, what will the social security in Spain will include? Access to the Spanish public healthcare system, subsidized medicines. This is also very important, okay, because some schemes to access the public healthcare system, like the Convenio Especial, will not include the subsidy in the medicines, which is quite big. Okay, retirement and disability coverage, and parental leave and sickness benefits. Okay, so it's important that you budget accordingly, because not only you will have to pay taxes, but also you will have to pay social security. All right. And just to give you a few, let's say, illustrative examples or ballpark figures, if you make taxable income 30,000 euros, okay, your income tax in Spain will be around 15%, and the social security will be around 2,300 per year, with a total burden of 25%. These are round numbers, so more or less you have those into your head when you calculate. For an income of 60,000 euros per year, the total burden will be 30%, and if you make 100K a year, total burden will be 35 to 40%. Okay, this is not tax advice, and also understand that depending where you move in Spain, the rates will vary, okay, depending on the region, and for specific taxes, there are huge variations, like wealth tax, for example, okay, or gift and inheritance tax. Those ones vary very, very dramatically depending on where you move. Now let's talk about a specific case scenario. Someone moved in the second half of the year in Spain, and maybe you heard, but how do you become a tax resident in Spain? If you spend in Spain more than 183 days in a calendar year that goes from January 1st to December 31st, those days don't need to be consecutive, and it doesn't matter your immigration status. Every single presence in Spain during that calendar year counts. So if you move after July 2nd, there's only 182 days in Spain. There are other conditions to become tax resident, but this is the most common. All right. So if you move in September, there's no time to become tax resident in Spain, right? This person moved in September, got the DNB, applied in October, got the DNB in November, and in December registered as autónomo. This person had to pay tax as a Spanish tax resident in 2024. Depending on who you ask, okay, I'm talking about tax advisors, they will say different things. But the most common, let's say, explanation or opinion about this is that in 2024, this person will pay tax as a non-resident, because all work that you make from Spanish territory, even if you're working remotely to a non-Spanish company, you will have to pay taxes on it. But since you were not a Spanish tax resident in 2024, because not enough days passed, then you will pay that income as non-resident tax. And then the next year, normally you will become a Spanish tax resident, and you will have to pay taxes as a Spanish tax resident. How does the income tax works in Spain? Well, it has a progressive tax system that has brackets that range from 19% to 47%. Big question is, for example, you see the table here that you have 60,000 euros to 300,000 euros, 45% tax. So, $1 million question: is it true that if I make 100K taxable income, will I have to pay 45% tax? That falls into the fifth bracket that goes from 60 to 300K. Well, the thing is that no, you will not have to pay 45% tax, because the way it works is that for the first 12,400 euros, you pay 19%. For the following 7,750, 24%. For the next 15,000 euros that you make, you pay 30%. So in the end, if you make 100K, you will pay some sort of average of median of those tax brackets. Therefore, the effective tax rate for 100K taxable income is around 36%. Okay, so it is high, but it's not as bad as some people think. Okay, and the effective tax rates for ordinary income, ballpark figures, no allowances or deductions here considered. For example, if you make 30K, around 24% income tax effective tax rate. Remember that you don't only pay income tax, you also pay social security contributions, etc. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about the tax calendars for autónomos. If you decide to move to Spain and become an autónomo, you will have to pay quarterly taxes, okay, for income tax, VAT, okay, and also you will have to pay an annual income tax and annual VAT, okay? So have those in mind. Normally you will pay 20% of your income every quarter as an income tax, and then the following year, when you declare the annual income of the previous year, if they see that you paid too much, which is not common, they will give you money back. Okay, you pay too much, they give you back. But if you need to pay over that 20%, which is extremely likely, okay, you will only have to pay the difference that you haven't already paid during your quarterly income tax payments. Okay, you will have to declare your 720 form, which is overseas assets. You need to show the properties that you have abroad. Bank accounts, like it is divided by different categories. For example, bank accounts, categories that are 50,000 euros or more. If you have, for example, 10 bank accounts of 5,000 euros in each, the total is 50,000. Therefore, that category needs to be fully disclosed in the 720 form. So basically, the authorities want to know what assets and rights held abroad you have, so they can extract their own conclusions in terms of, wealth tax, solidarity tax, or income tax. Potentially, you're getting income from rentals abroad, etc., etc. So 720 form is a declaration form where you disclose your overseas assets. Okay, so I highly recommend you using a gestor. You can find on Spainguru.es. And of course, this is just so you have in mind, because taxation here is quite complex, and I'm trying to condense a lot of information in just a few slides. Okay, so we talked about the social security increase, And remember that in Madrid and Andalusia, if you work in Madrid and Andalusia as a freelancer, you will pay the first year 80 euros, 90 euros, okay, per month as Social Security, but then you can apply for a subsidy, and the following year they will pay you back what you paid during the first year, okay? That actually was my case. I was paying 86 euros per month, okay, and then I applied for a subsidy, and then they give me back what I was paying as Social Security during the first year. So something to have in mind. How much will my net salary be? All right, so now, of course, probably your head is exploding with so much information, but how much would you take home, okay, after all this is applied? So if you make, let's say, the minimum threshold for the digital nomad visa, 2,750, round numbers, okay? If you consider the income tax, okay, and the Social Security, more or less, approximately, you will pay 31%. The burden will be 31%, okay? If you increase to 3,500, 33%. 4,000, 34, up to 39% if you make 10,000 euros per month, okay? So it is a progressive rate, but let's say that in proportion, lower salaries pay a higher, let's say a higher absolute number, let's say. If you want to know more about taxes in general about Spain, I highly recommend you to join my free bi-weekly webinar that you can join today, and I always send a recording for it. Now let's talk about visa renewal. We're saying that now visa renewals are considered as almost new applications. So you have to be careful and plan them correctly, especially if your certificate of coverage is expiring and many other casuistics. Now, if you're applying outside of Spain, the initial visa approval may be up to 1 year. If you're applying from within Spain, it's up to 3 years, okay, for indefinite contracts. But after 3 years, you can renew for 2 more years, okay? So the renewals are for 2 more years. If applying for your TA card must be within 30 days of arrival if you were approved for a digital nomad visa from a consulate, okay? The renewal window, okay, so there is a window to renew, right? So the difference, the moment in which your residence expires, okay, it has an end in your TA card. There's a final date there, okay, in start date and end date. So when do you renew? You can start renewing within 60 days of your expiration date in your TA card and up to 90 days after, although everyone will recommend you to do it as soon as possible, because if you get denied, you then run out of days, and of course, well, you are reducing your possibilities to stay in Spain, okay? Something important to point out is that after 5 years of legal residence in Spain, you may apply for permanent residence, technically long-term residence. But remember that there is a minimum stay requirements in order to apply for the long-term residence, which is you cannot be outside of Spain more than 10 months within the last 5 years before applying for the long-term residency. Those 10 months don't need to be consecutive, but they cannot be more than 6 months in one block, okay? So it's important to mention, and this is outside of Spain, right? As I said, if you travel within Schengen, it is hard to enforce that you have been outside of Spain, but definitely if you go out of Schengen, it is very clear for authorities to see where you are, okay? But the rule is about Spain, not about Schengen, being out of Schengen, but about Spain, okay? And the pathway for citizenship, okay? Normally, it takes 10 years of legal residence in order to apply for the Spanish passport. If you're a US passport holder, UK, Canada, Australia, all those countries in gray, okay? But if you are a dual citizen, okay, or passport holder of any of those red countries, that is Hispano-American countries, Portugal, Andorra, Guinea Equatorial, Philippines, all those countries have agreements with Spain and are eligible for a 2-year fast track only. So only after 2 years, those passport holders can apply for Spanish citizenship. So something to definitely have in mind. Now, what's different when you renew your visa, okay? Remember, again, it's not a formality. It's almost like reapplying. You must meet all income, work, and legal requirements again. And renewals will require updated income proof for the last 6 to 12 months, updated criminal record certificate from Spain, okay? So be careful. Driving under the influence can be included in the criminal record in Spain and could lead to potential rejections, okay? Proof of continued remote work and business activity, confirmation of Spanish address and up-to-date empadronamiento. In this case, for the renewal, you will need an empadronamiento. And if there are any changes, you need to inform the UGE within 30 days of any changes in your status or your work or employment, etc. They want to have control on that. And also, if you happen to be required to have a private health insurance, don't have gaps in your health insurance coverage. This is very important, okay? Common renewal issues: income drops below the required level, freelancers fail to show consistent activities, delays with paperwork or expired documents, new apostille requirements, because as I said, for the 2025 update, be careful because many documents now require apostille, and gaps in health insurance. coverage, okay, health insurance, public or not, okay. So important that, and especially if you want to apply for long-term residence, you need to have continuous health insurance or coverage during the last 5 years, okay. Another things to consider: gaps in residency permit. Okay, you must have 5 years of continued legal residence in Spain for the long-term residency application. So therefore, if you're gonna finish your digital nomad residence, okay, your teleworkers residence, also known as, make sure that there are no gaps with the next residence or pathway that you have planned for if you're planning to apply for the long-term visa, because the 5 years need to be continuous. Okay, the legal immigration status. Right, of course, you can be out of Spain under the minimum thresholds, okay, the maximum thresholds of being outside of Spain. Your legal status should be continued, okay, your legal residency status. We mentioned about the maximum 10 months in the last 5 years for the long-term residency application. And if you're going to apply for the fast track, remember, you can't be more than 90 days outside of Spain in each of the in 12 months, okay, in the previous 2 years before applying for Spanish citizenship, no more than 90 days. And this was a judge that said this. It is not a rule, it's jurisprudence. Smart tips for a small renewal: avoid surprises by keeping your documents organized from day one, income statements, invoices, client letters. You have to be very, very careful, very organized, very methodical. Security, social security payment records if self-employed. Monitor your income to ensure you meet the threshold every month. Update your empadronamiento if you move. Remember that takes time, and also the empadronamiento certificates have a validity of 3 months. Set reminders to begin your renewal process for at least 2 months before expiry, because you need to allow time to gather your documents. And start gathering your documents at least 4 to 3 months before expiry. Get a new background check from Spain with no pending legal issues, of course. Yeah, so it's very, very important that you pay attention to your renewal because it's quite strict. What do you do when your certificate of coverage or A1 is expiring? They typically cover up to 2 years, but when it expires, you have 3 options. First, you apply for a renewal, which is not always granted, or switch to an autónomo, okay, and register with Spanish Social Security. Convince your employer to register for Spain Social Security. That will grant you Beckham law eligibility, potentially. Okay, potentially. You could potentially leave Spain temporarily, and that may reset the clock. Okay. And consider immigration pathways such as arraigos. Now, different types of arraigos. You need to be, let's say, irregular at the time of application for an arraigo. So you need to consider consulting with an immigration expert in order to go through that pathway. I recently published a video with Ainhoa Manero of Stern Abogados talking about the arraigo updates, okay, which are different now in 2025. Or changing to non-lucrative visa, changing to a normal work permit for a Spanish company, etc., etc. There are different ways, okay, or are not Spanish company. So be careful with this, because some UGE renewal rejections have been based on expired A1 coverage, and Spain expects continuity, okay? So you have to be careful and have a plan ready on what you're going to do when that A1 certificate expires, okay? Remember, you can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free, okay? I highly recommend you going on Spainguru. Subscribe to the newsletter. It is free. You can opt out anytime, where I feature the most common discussions, the most active discussions on Spainguru's social groups. Watch the YouTube videos. I have maybe hundreds of videos about the digital nomad visa. Read the blog posts and join, of course, the community. Spanish Digital Nomad Visa is one of the groups, the largest group out there, with more than 16,000 members. And of course, it's absolutely free to join and to leave if you're no longer interested. You can also join the webinars. I have non-lucrative visa, Spanish taxes, move to Spain. There's also the Portugal Golden Visa, and now the Digital Nomad Visa. So a big series of webinars out there, all of them free, and all of them include the recordings if you register, okay? But of course, if you need professional help, and I'm telling you that for Digital Nomad Visa, 95% of people choose to go with experienced DNV professionals, because it is a little bit of a minefield. Potentially, you probably have extracted that conclusion from the presentation of today. It is a bit complex, so many things to have in mind and a lot of timing that you need to plan for. So you can find vetted professional immigration lawyers on Spainguru.es that I have personally vetted. I have personally used many of them, and I have recommended them for several years. Tax advisors, financial planners, NLV or Digital Nomad Visa or any Spanish visa or residency, compliant health insurance, medical certificates from Spanish doctor, UK doctor, sworn translation, apostle services, and so many other services. More than 100 resources with discounts, with referral codes. So you would be helping yourself and helping me if you use those services as well. And you can stay in touch with me. You can always send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, join the Facebook group. watch the YouTube channel, join the newsletter, and remember that the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Always check your specific consulates and UGE page requirements, okay? And now, before jumping on the Q&A session, remember that this is an absolutely free webinar. I'm sharing with you all this information, which I hope you found helpful. If you think that it is worth it, please leave a Trustpilot review. On the top, you have a green bar with a red button. You can click there and it will redirect you to Trustpilot, and it only takes you 5 seconds to leave those stars out there, and it will really, really help me in Spainguru and any other people who may be interested in watching this information. It will be potentially very helpful for them too. Now let's go to your questions. And I have only just one question here. Just one question in the chat. And thanks again for everyone for joining today. I know it is quite early for many of the readers of Spainguru to join, especially Americans. They have to wake up extremely early. Americans and Canadians, it is not the best time for them. And many people signed up for the recording. Shaikh, I'm from India. If I come to Spain on a tourist visa to apply for DME, do I need to submit income tax files that I have filed from my home country? Yes, you can. I went through the documentation, but basically you need to pay attention to the. I'm trying to find the slides. Okay, I'm trying to find the slides here for the requirements, because let me see terminology. You need to show that the company you work for is active. Okay. More documents, stricter for business, decisions. Let me see if I find here. Company registration, tax and social security reports used as work proof require postal. So in order to make your case strong, okay, sometimes submitting your income tax for certain activities will be useful, and you will need to submit it in order to make your case strong, as far as I understand. I'm not an immigration lawyer, and now these are, like, let's say, new requirements to make your case stronger, because the Spanish authorities want to be a little bit more strict in understanding that you are actually the person who you say you are, and that you are performing the services that you say you perform, okay, for the right amount of time that they require. So they will potentially, it will be necessary that you submit tax declarations, okay. Jessica, gracias por toda la información. Muchas gracias a ti por unirte hoy. Muchísimas gracias. Sudanshu, I'm a business owner, sole trader. Let me see if I can publish that. I'm a business owner, sole trader, running a registered company in India for the last 7 years. My company has 20 plus employees. We have income tax and VAT returns for the last 7 years. We sell on Amazon. All the payments from Amazon come directly to the company account in India. I do not draw monthly salary from my own company. I use profits as when needed, but yearly profits surpass the financial requirements for DNB easily. Amen. Okay, so this is, let's say, one of the common, let's say, one of the asked questions, especially for people who work with different companies. Like, potentially they cannot provide certificate of company registration, etc., or you don't have, let's say, pay slips for those companies, etc., etc. So there are different workarounds for this. And as I said, I'm not an immigration lawyer, and I don't know exactly what documents, but what I have in mind right now is that potentially you will get the payments through a company, and that company will pay you, okay? But I should find, if you send me an email, because I have content on this, okay? If you send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, maybe I can find the links to those pieces of content, because there are people in your situation that have asked this in the group, and they had received the recommendation from other Spainguru members. So I have uploaded that information to spainguru.es, but right now I can't record it, unfortunately. But if you send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, I will write it down there. I will take the time to try to find the right information to at least point you in the right direction, okay? All right, we made it till the end. Thank you so much for joining today. It was really a pleasure to have you here. And this is the first Digital Nomad Visa webinar that I have. I plan to do this every 15 days, every 3 weeks. Not sure when it's going to be exactly the same one, but I will publish it this week. And you will receive a recording on your email that will redirect you to Spainguru's YouTube channel once the video is uploaded, okay? Well, thank you so much for joining today. I wish you a wonderful day and evening. If you haven't done so, leave a Trustpilot review. It will make my day and week. It will make me really, really happy. And yeah, stay in touch. Thank you so much. And I will be waiting your emails if you need anything from me. Thank you. Take care. Goodbye.